The Star Wars canon is an impressive undertaking with the promise of having all media be on the same level of importance as the movies. But sometimes crucial information gets cut from the movies only to find their way to one of the canon novels, comics, or the visual dictionaries that accompany the films. Upon learning these story beats, you may look at scenes in the movies differently or simply be glad you now have that knowledge. We got a brief introduction to the Guavian death gang in The Force Awakens when two rival criminal organizations board Han Solo's freighter searching for the 50,000 credits owed to them. Both gangs were quickly demolished by the hungry Rathtars, however, so we didn't get to learn much about them aside from that they had flashy red armor. Thanks to the visual dictionary by Pablo Hidalgo, we know that the Guavian death gang's enforcers are actually cybernetically enhanced and are able to communicate via frequency without actually being heard. They're also injected with chemicals via a reservoir in their suits that makes them more aggressive and agile than the average person. Unfortunately for them, it all proved useless against the hunger of a Rathtar. We're not sure if the enhancements are public knowledge or not, but someone should tell that to Kanja Club. The perk of some of these reference books is that we get to see all the tiny details that would otherwise be impossible to slip into the narrative of the film, which is too busy focusing on the bigger picture. Case in point, the First Order's fancy weapons. The one we're thinking of comes from the stormtrooper the internet lovingly referred to as TR-8R or Traitor before it was revealed his ID tag was FN2199 aka Nines. He's the one who called out Finn as a traitor and used the Z6 Riot control baton to fight him in Takodana. That weapon is actually used for crowd control when the First Order is pacifying an angry mob on a planet they've subjugated. So while it does make a fancy melee weapon, this was not the intended purpose of the Z6. Oh, Captain Phasma, we hardly knew ye. The character was heavily promoted in the marketing material for the sequel trilogy, but fans have since dubbed her this generation's Boba Fett. A character that looks cool, but didn't contribute much of anything to the story. But for fans of the character, she does have a pretty interesting novel and has popped up in Star Wars Resistance from time to time. The most iconic thing about her is the shiny armor that stands her apart from other troopers. The armor is actually crafted out of the Naboo yacht that once belonged to Palpatine himself. The yacht was made out of chromium, a sign of status on Naboo that gives their ships their silver shine. The armor can reduce radiation and deflect blaster shots, but she mainly wore it for the power status. While the Supreme Leader of the First Order came off as a giant hologram in The Force Awakens, we saw that he was of a more normal stature during The Last Jedi. But while the focus was on Snoke and his elite Praetorian guards, fans may have also caught a glimpse of the aliens who were also in the throne room with Snoke. The camera never draws attention to them and Snoke never brings them up, but Pablo Hidalgo does in the visual dictionary for Episode 8. The aliens actually come from the unknown regions of space like Snoke himself, and were particularly knowledgeable in the hyperspace lanes in the uncharted regions of space. This allowed the First Order to stay hidden for so many years as they slipped through otherwise impossible to navigate portions of the galaxy. When fans saw Rogue One for the first time, many were confused over the new addition to the Rebel fleet. We all know and love the X-Wings and Y-Wings, but suddenly we have the U-Wing ships as well. Fans immediately began to wonder why we didn't see these ships at all in the original trilogy if they were at Scarif. Leave it to Pablo Hidalgo to have an answer for that. For the Ultimate Guide release of Rogue One, he detailed that there were already so few U-Wings by the time of Rogue One. The company that made the ships, Incom Corporation, never even got the chance to finish its first production of the ship before the Empire took over the company for their own needs. The U-Wing will play a role in the book Alphabet Squad, which is exactly what you think it is. One of the most iconic shots of The Force Awakens was Rey's tiny speeder whizzing by the crashed Star Destroyer on Jakku. When that shot appeared in the trailer, many fans began wondering what happened. As it turned out, a giant battle occurred on the planet between the Empire and Rebellion 1 year after Andor. There's no mention of the battle in the movies, but fans can see what happened in the books Lost Stars and Empire's End, the latter of which gives some pretty heavy insight as to what the Imperial hierarchy hoped to achieve on Jakku, and what they did behind the scenes that would set the stage for the First Order. We think a passing comment about the Battle of Jakku would have at least benefited those casual viewers who don't dive into the canon. The first act of Solo: A Star Wars Story introduced us to a collection of colorful and interesting thieves under the leadership of Woody Harrelson's Beckett. One of the more energetic characters in the group was Rio Durante, voiced by the Mandalorian's scribe Jon Favreau. But Rio was taken out of the picture much too soon, and we didn't get to learn much about him on screen. On the page, though, is a different story. In the story guide written by, wait for it, Pablo Hidalgo, we get a lot more information on Rio. He fought in the Clone Wars in a militia known as Freedom's Sons alongside the Republic. But the kicker was that the militia didn't offer any sort of pension, so Rio was left without much money to his name after the war ended. So he turned to a life of crime just to get by. In the original cut of The Force Awakens, Poe Dameron was supposed to die after his crash landing on Jakku, but Oscar Isaac was having so much fun that he begged J.J. Abrams to spare the character and have him return later on in the movie. That's exactly what happened, but since that was changed on the fly, we never got to see how Poe escaped Jakku. Thankfully, for those who want to know these things, the events are detailed in the Poe Dameron comic, specifically in Volume 5. In it, Poe tells Finn and Rey aboard the Falcon about his adventures, and the topic of Jakku comes up. Poe tells him that he met a junker and helped him out. Upon learning that Finn and BB-8 had left the planet in a hurry, he barters for passage off-world and meets up with the Resistance, who take him to their base. The Force Awakens taught us that Kylo Ren is a bit of a Vader fanboy. He has a shrine with the Sith Lord's charred helmet and a box of ashes that he regularly talks to. Kylo's ambition in life is to continue to wipe out the Force sensitives across the galaxy, much like his grandfather did in the Dark Times. But how did this start? Surely Han and Leia would want to keep that aspect of their lives on the down low. As it turns out, they tried, and Leia actually kept the secret of her father under wraps until around 5 or 6 years before The Force Awakens, when the information became public knowledge thanks to political rivals. Leia was forced to tell Ben the truth before he saw it on the news, and that likely shifted him down the path of the dark side. Warwick Davis has been a part of the Star Wars family ever since Return of the Jedi, where he played the primary Ewok, Wicket. From there, he's had cameos in just about every Star Wars film, from Phantom Menace to Rogue One. He shot one for The Last Jedi, but his part was actually chopped from the film and can be viewed as one of the deleted scenes. But we get to learn more about why Shoklop was on Kanataka in Saladin Ahmed's short story Salesman of the Year in the Canto Bight collection book. After being flown to the casino planet, Shoklop's life gets turned upside down, and he rubs shoulders with some unsavory people on a vacation he'd likely never forget. But he came out on top and ended up with a lot of credits in his pocket, which explains why the salesman could afford time in such an expensive bathhouse. Fans of the old Expanded Universe Han Solo books loved the fact that he was an Imperial pilot for a time. The Solo film also followed this trajectory, but we barely got to see Han's involvement with the Empire thanks to some of these scenes being cut from the movie. In the expanded edition of the novel and the deleted scenes for the movie, we get to see Han piloting a TIE fighter and getting sentenced for his reckless behavior. It's actually a pretty great scene, and one has to wonder if Ron Howard should have kept it in the final cut, as it gives more insight to Han's piloting abilities and the Empire's strict policy on following orders. Han's reckless behavior saved a fellow pilot's life, but he was seen as insubordinate in the process, and those actions are what gets him transferred to Mimban. Rogue One has been growing in popularity within the Star Wars community ever since it was released, but if there's one thing it can be criticized for, it's not having much in the way of characterization. For the most part, this is fine since the film prioritizes plot over characters, but some backstory would be nice. That's why it's great to know fans can read about Jin's past in Rebel Rising. In it, we get to see what happens between her and Saw after he lifts the hatch in Rogue One. The book showcases Saw's descent into madness and the extreme ways of his tactics, while also showing how Jin transitioned from frightened youth to the Imperial prisoner at the start of her arc in the movie. The book definitely gives you a reason to fear Saw and explains why the rebellion calls him out as a terrorist. The Last Jedi had a ton of deleted scenes included on the Blu-ray, and frustratingly, many of the scenes feel crucial to the overall story, even more so than some of the scenes that were left in the final cut. One of the most pivotal and interesting scenes that was shot for the entire movie was actually left behind on the cutting room floor, but was at least included in the novelization and the deleted scenes. The scene is only 16 seconds long, but we see Luke mourn the loss of his best friend Han Solo, who was killed in the last movie. This seems like a crucial moment for the character, and it's weird to know that it was shot but not included in the movie, considering how short the scene is. Jason Fry at least included it in the novelization, so the event is canon. Fans of The Last Jedi, and there are fans of the movie out there, will have noticed that while Luke promised to teach Rey 3 important lessons, we only got to see 2 of those during the movie. Did Rey leave Ahch-To before getting that lesson from Luke, or was it cut from the final version? Despite being an important part of the plot, it was cut from the movie. But you can find out what it was thanks to the insight of Pablo Hidalgo in the visual dictionary and the novelization. In those sources, there are details that the third lesson would have been about the visitors to the island. The visitors are the male Lanais who come to visit the caretakers from time to time. Luke manipulates Rey to act on bad information only to stumble on a party instead of a pirate attack. This scene was shot, so it's also part of the film's deleted scenes. Time to break out the Blu-ray. Fans of the Old Republic will have no doubt read the Darth Bane trilogy, and if you haven't, you totally should. The Sith Lord also made a brief appearance in the Clone Wars TV show, voiced by none other than Mark Hamill. But did you know the Dark Lord of the Sith actually had his roots in place during the Phantom Menace? In the novelization for the film, written by none other than Terry Brooks, we get a lot of information on the history of the Sith, including the legendary Rule of Two. It's here where Darth Bane gets name-dropped almost 7 years before Path of Destruction would be published. George Lucas supplied a lot of the history on the Sith and Jedi to Brooks for the novel, so it's likely Lucas himself was already planning something for Bane at this point in time. There wasn't much in the way of character information in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. The biggest bit of backstory came from a brief scene where Cassian told Jyn he's been in the fight ever since he was a child. Audiences wanted to learn more about this grizzled and morally ambiguous hero, and in the novelization for the movie, we did. The novel actually details that in his youth. Cassian was actually a separatist during the Clone Wars and saw the Jedi and the Republic as his enemies. But the book also points out that he was too young to see the bigger picture and was blindly following orders without asking himself why he was fighting the Republic. Of course, when the Separatists were defeated and the Republic became the Empire, Cassian's outlook changed and he would eventually join the rebellion. In Solo: A Star Wars Story, the droid L337 is badly damaged, and in order to escape, the crew aboard the Falcon are forced to download her navigational systems into the Falcon in order to live and find a way for L3's legacy to carry on. In the movie, this happens without a hitch or a concern. But in the novelization, we saw the experience for L3 was pretty traumatizing, as she did not want to become a voiceless and bodiless entity within a ship. She hopes that Lando will be able to save her and put her into a new droid body, but her fate is one of silence. And to read her thoughts in real time during the procedure is honestly heartbreaking and disturbing, as the Falcon tries to reassure her that being a ship isn't so bad. Tell that to the droid who tried orchestrating a revelation for droid rights. Okay, so Hondo didn't exactly win over too many fans, thanks largely in part to her withholding the plan from Poe Dameron. But despite being in the film more as a plot device, she does have more backstory that's not included in the film. Holdo and Leia were friends as teenagers, and Leia remarked that Holdo's crazy wardrobe and brightly colored hair would often clash. By the end of the book, Holdo has found a reasonable balance between a dignified politician and fun hippie with her choice of clothes and hair. This can be seen in the novel Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Pablo Hidalgo would further pull the veil back in the visual dictionary by telling us that her choice of wardrobe is intentional, and that it pays respect to the culture of her people back home on Gadalenta. So what happened to the Gungans? They played a critical role in the Phantom Menace and showed up in passing in episodes 2, 3, and the Clone Wars animated series. But then they fell off the face of the galaxy, not unlike many classic aliens from the original series. But in the novel Last Shot, Han encounters a Gungan while on a mission who informs Han and his ragtag crew of misfits that the Gungans tried assimilating with the Naboo people on the surface, but this was met with tokenism and empty promises that ultimately failed to unite the two species despite both being of Naboo. As for Jar Jar, he was exiled from the Gungans again and lived his life as a traveling street jester, suffering from a bit of depression due to constantly being laughed at and being blamed for the rise of the Empire. Yeesh, we almost feel bad for the guy.
What?
We said almost. In the old Legends continuity of novels, Leia would follow in her brother's footsteps and become a Jedi herself, complete with mastery of the Force and a blue lightsaber. Clearly, the canon version of Leia has walked a different path, as she is now known as General Organa and is the figurehead for the Resistance, with a career in the Senate before the First Order threat became real. So why did she choose politics over the Force? In the novel Bloodline, she states that politics never harmed her family, while the Force has done so much to it and will continue to do so once Ben Solo falls to the dark side. But that doesn't mean Leia hasn't dabbled in a few Force powers along the way, as evidenced by the infamous spaceflight scene in The Last Jedi. If you grew up reading the expanded universe material, you'll know what horrors fell upon the Wookiees and their homeworld once the Empire came knocking. The species was largely enslaved and put to work in the name of the Empire. We got a peek of this in Solo: A Star Wars Story, but we never got to see what happened to the Wookiee homeworld or hear about their imprisonment. Thankfully, Han and Chewie decide enough is enough and march on over to Kashyyyk in order to liberate it. It would have been a nice passing comment in The Force Awakens to hear Han say it, especially since we see enslaved Wookiees in Solo. But the Aftermath novels, specifically the second entry titled Life Debt, details Han and Chewie's quest to end the Empire's reign of terror on that planet. How many times did Yoda or another Jedi Master confess to not being able to see the future due to how clouded the dark side was making their foresight abilities? Well, it was a lot, and it made a lot of fans wonder just how strong their force powers were. But the novel Tarkin dropped a huge bombshell on the canon that will change how you watch the prequel films forever. Despite being a symbol of hope and peace, the Jedi Temple houses a dark secret that even the Jedi aren't aware of. As it turns out, the temple is actually built on the foundations of an old Sith shrine. The shrine was strong with the dark side of the Force, and as it lay under the temple for thousands of years, some of that power leached to the temple and clouded the Jedi's vision, keeping Palpatine's identity secret despite him being in such close proximity and preventing them from seeing what horrors will soon come to pass. During the opening crawl for The Empire Strikes Back, we learn that Vader continues his hunt for Luke Skywalker. But if you paused to think about it, you had to have wondered how Vader even knew who Luke was. It wasn't as if the two exchanged dialogue in A New Hope, nor did Vader learn of his identity in that movie. In the flagship comic, currently set between A New Hope and Empire, Vader actually hires Boba Fett to track down the one responsible for the destruction of the Death Star, who also just so happens to be in possession of his old lightsaber. Fett returns with only a name: Luke Skywalker. As you can imagine, Vader is a little shocked upon learning that his son survived and is out there in the galaxy, and increases his hatred for Palpatine, which is why he offers Luke the chance to destroy the Emperor at his side for his deceit. When the first teaser for The Force Awakens came out, everyone wanted to know more about Kylo's crossguard saber and if it's practical to use. Well, practical it is, but the films have yet to explain the origins of the saber. Thankfully, Pablo Hidalgo once again has answers for that. Despite the advancements in technology since the original films, Kylo's saber is actually of ancient design, dating back to the Old Republic era. This particular saber can be found on Jedi during the Great Scourge of Malachor, which happened thousands of years before the movies. Ezra even gets to show off one of these sabers in Rebels Season 2 finale. The unstable blade comes from a cracked crystal which can actually blow at any second. The vents can be used both as a weapon and to let out excess energy. Fans of the Clone Wars and Rebels animated series will likely have a fond place in their fandom hearts for Hondo Ohnaka, the devious and sometimes sinister pirate with a heart of gold, as long as he's getting paid. Well, as it turns out, that pirate actually got his hands on the Millennium Falcon, which probably made the scoundrel really happy, especially when you factor in that he once possessed Slave 1 as well. In the book Pirate's Price, Chewie sends a request to Hondo for some help in locating a Quad-X power core for the ship. The Falcon makes its way to Ohnaka Transportation, which is located on the planet Batuu. That's the in-universe explanation why the Falcon is on the planet, which serves as the canonical story setting for the upcoming Disney Parks ride Galaxy's Edge. Hondo will also serve as a character in the park through animatronic technology. As you can see, there is a lot of extra content to be found outside the films. Are you someone who reads the books and comics, or do you simply stick to the movies? What's your favorite bit of non-movie information that you wish they kept in the movies or at least mentioned? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.